No watchmaker requires less of an introduction than Rolex. It is a brand whose name is known far beyond the confines of our industry. Rolex is synonymous with luxury, replaceable with value, and imbued with a legacy that no amount of money, spin, or publicity can replicate. But how did the company grow from being started by an orphan to the multi-billion-dollar enterprise it is now? This is the story of how Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis started and grew a wristwatch manufacturing company. To understand why Rolex has such dominion over the industry and its trends, we must go back to the beginning, to the dawn of the 20th century, and into the mind of a successful entrepreneur who believed he had hit upon an idea that would put his newly founded company on the map. Rolex's history began in 1905 when Hans Wilsdorf founded the company with his brother-in-law, Alfred Davis. The company was founded in England, but it quickly relocated to Switzerland. Working together seemed like a perfect move because Hans had the idea and Alfred had the money. Hans Wilsdorf early life? We will be forgiven if we think Hans was from America or Switzerland, but he wasn't. He was a German orphan. Hans was born in 1881 in Kulmbach, northern Bavaria, to a prosperous middle-class family. His grandparents were well off, and his parents ran an ironmonger shop in Kulmbach. As a result, Hans was able to enjoy a relatively carefree childhood. When he turned 12, however, disaster struck twice. Both of his parents died soon after each other. Hans and his two siblings became orphans in a short period of time. Eventually, his relatives took him to a school in Coburg, and it was there that he devoted his time to studying books and became quite proficient at reading, writing, and speaking in English. At the age of 19, Hans moved to La Chaux-de-Fonds in Switzerland in search of a better life. La Chaux-de-Fonds was once a premier watchmaking location, making it an excellent location to gain exclusive experience. This is where Hans first became fascinated with watches. After working for a pearl merchant, he was hired by Kuno Korten, a developing watch company. He had no prior experience making watches, so what did he have that they needed? He could read and write English, so he could respond to letters from the American and British empires. Hans developed a fascination with watch movements and their accuracy while working for Kuno Korten. A new partnership is formed. Following his employment with Kuno Korten, Hans decided it was time to launch his own watch industry career. After relocating to London, he connected with his brother-in-law, Alfred Davis, who was a good partner for the project. In 1905, they established Wilsdorf and Davis jointly. At the time, Hans was 24 years old. The duo specialized in the distribution of timepieces. Simply put, at first, Hans and Davis Hermann-Egler's quality movements and then placed them in quality watch cases made by companies such as Denison, and sold them to jewelers. Having achieved a level of success in this endeavor, the two realized the potential for creating their own brand. In 1908, this was realized when Wilsdorf secured the name Rolex. The Rolex brand. The name Rolex didn't come from the watchmaker's last name. Rather, Wilsdorf claimed that a genie whispered Rolex in his ear while he was riding on a horse-drawn bus. Wilsdorf wanted a short name that would be simple to remember and pronounce in any language. Although the company began in London, it quickly established a presence in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland, after registering the Rolex trademark. At the time, wristwatches were very much available, but they were not the men's choice. Wristwatches were notorious for being unreliable. So, men preferred pocket watches, which were more accurate and protected from harsh weather conditions. Wristwatches, on the other hand, were seen as fashion statements for women. However, Hans saw beyond all these. Wilsdorf always saw an appeal for precision in timekeeping. The precise movements of each hand dancing along the clock face had never been seen before. This was enough to capture the hearts of Londoners and catapult Waldorf into the luxury watch industry, and in 1910, a Rolex became the first wristwatch to carry the Swiss certificate of chronometric precision. After receiving such a prestigious acknowledgement, the Kew Observatory, UK, awarded Rolex a Class A certificate for precision, a distinction that up until that point had been reserved for marine chronometers. In 1919, Rolex relocated from London to the enchanting setting of Geneva, a city highly regarded in the watchmaking market. A step towards global acceptance. Hans was not satisfied with the success his company was making. He wanted more, and that would require an out-of-the-box idea. Rolex started to assemble a prestigious clientele in order to match its unparalleled status in the luxury watch industry. The brand, known as Watches for Achievers, attracted explorers from around the world looking for a wristwatch they could trust no matter where they were. In 1926, they created the world's first waterproof and dustproof watch, which, while impressive at the time, was a far cry from their deep-sea challenge watch, which can now dive to 12,000 meters. Mercedes Gleitze swam across the English Channel wearing one of the first waterproof wristwatches. Unfortunately for Mercedes, her record attempt was thwarted due to the adverse weather. She was brought back to the coast on a vessel after spending more than 15 hours in the icy waters between France and the United Kingdom. Her Rolex, on the other hand, was completely intact and kept accurate time, despite hours of immersion in cold seawater. The death-defying feat drew the attention of the British media, catapulting Rolex back into the spotlight. Shortly after creating the waterproof Oyster, Rolex kept up its innovative trend by creating the perpetual rotor in 1931. This is what is referred to as an automated or self-winding movement nowadays. The perpetual rotor could complete a 360-degree rotation and supply power to the mainspring. Another invention added to the Oyster perpetual models was the automatic date complication. This was introduced in 1945. This model was the first automatic chronometer to have a date aperture on the dial. The Day-Date was launched in 1956 and was the first watch to display both the day and date. This model went on to be worn by U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson and was dubbed the President's Watch. The model features a distinctive three-piece link bracelet, which Rolex calls the President Bracelet. Elite athletes began to champion Rolex as the only watch to wear in hostile environments. Sir Malcolm Campbell, aka the King of Speed, set a new land speed record of 300 miles per hour while wearing his Rolex watch. For National Geographic, James Cameron wore his Rolex as he explored the depths of the Mariana Trench. Before long, Rolex watches became so popular among elites, including Pope John Paul, Fidel Castro, James Bond, and Warren Buffett. With such a unique clientele of some of the world's most illustrious adventurers, Rolex quickly became synonymous with producing long-lasting, accurate timepieces. To Rolex, guaranteeing that their products are consistent with the brand's premium efficiency standard is just as important as the aesthetics of their watches. Still, the watches were not as expensive as they are now. Everything changed following what was called the Quartz Crisis. The Quartz Crisis. The 1970s were a transitional period for both the Swiss watch industry and the watch industry as a whole. On Christmas Day 1969, the Japanese watchmaker Seiko unveiled the Astron, the world's first quartz wristwatch. Instead of a mechanical or automatic movement, it used a battery-powered one. As a result, the Quartz Crisis began. Quartz watches quickly gained popularity due to their low cost and durability, in addition to the allure of the new, futuristic-looking technology. Not only were they less expensive than most mechanical or automatic watches, but they were also remarkably durable and accurate. And, while the production of mechanical and automatic watches had advanced significantly since the days when watches were built entirely by hand, quartz watches remained much easier to produce. Soon after, the existing market, particularly the Swiss, began to suffer significantly. They had difficulty keeping up with quartz watches in terms of price, precision, and production. However, Rolex resisted new technology in order to preserve centuries of watchmaking tradition. A new marketing strategy. Unable to match the watches that flooded the market from Japan, Rolex decided to do something different. The company had already made its name, so it was just a matter of putting that name further out there for the whole world to see. As a result, Rolex invested heavily in building the prestigious brand image they have today. When flying was still a luxurious pursuit, Rolex timepieces were installed at airports, and upscale leisure activities including tennis, golf, equestrian sports, yachts, and the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra were sponsored. The Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. As a result of these marketing strategies, the Rolex brand has grown into what it is today, and Rolex watches are even more coveted today than ever before. However, Hans was unable to see this rise. In fact, he had already long withdrawn himself from the watch business. Following the death of his wife, Florence Crotty, in 1945, Hans transferred the responsibility for the company to the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. He passed away 15 years later in Geneva at the age of 79, and as he did not have any children, the foundation has taken over ownership of the brand to this day. The non-profit foundation supports the arts and cultures, as seen in the Mentor and Protégé initiative, grants scholarships to students, and responds to public and private social services requests. Since 2002, Rolex, under the ownership of the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, has matched young enthusiasts for architecture, dancing, writing, and cinema with mentors who help them create portfolios and even acquire access to networks that will be useful to them for the rest of their life. The Rolex brand today. Over the years, Rolex has maintained consistency in its designs while introducing little model adjustments. While many businesses altered throughout the quartz crisis and ultimately lost ground in the market, the Rolex brand remained constant. For the last 10 years, Rolex has maintained its tradition of producing sports watches, which have grown in popularity. The company divides its watch selection into two groups: traditional timepieces and business watches. The Rolex Submariner, Date President, Cosmograph Daytona, Datejust, Yachtmaster, GMT Master 2, Explorer, Explorer 2, Air King, Oyster Date, Oyster Perpetual, Date, Sea Dweller, Deep Sea, Date 2, Masterpiece, Lady Pro Master, Lady Datejust, and Lady Perpetual watches are just a few of the exquisite and unmatched timepieces that Rolex continues to produce. Each model has its own personality and creates a different sense of achievement, power, and adventure. The diversity of these watches is certain to suit the most discerning tastes. They are available in a range of sizes and metals, including gold, white gold, stainless steel, two-tone, and optional diamonds or mother-of-pearl dials. For a brand started by an orphan boy, Rolex has remained an exclusive brand, reserved only for the elite. A Rolex item is more than just a watch, it is a declaration. Instead of shouting flamboyantly at passers-by, the watch walks with its owner to support and recognize their accomplishments. A Rolex, whether it is brand new or pre-owned, exudes a level of sophistication that cannot be ignored.